So, picture this. I'm sitting in this little coffee shop near our apartment, just trying to enjoy a quiet Saturday morning. I'm minding my own business, scrolling through the news on my phone, when Jamie, my roommate, strides in with this grin like he's about to drop the juiciest gossip on the planet. He spots me right away and plops down across the table like we're best buds catching up after years apart. Now, Jamie's usually chatty, but today, he's got this gleam in his eye that immediately sets off alarm bells. Seconds after sitting down, he leans in and casually mentions something so personal about me it knocked the wind out of me. He goes, "Hey, I noticed the way you wince every time you raise your left arm. That old shoulder injury from basketball? Must still sting sometimes." What? How the hell does he know about that? I don't exactly wear my scars on my sleeve, especially to a random coffee place where I wasn't planning on spilling anything personal. My mind immediately races back. When did I even mention this to Jamie? He wasn't here when I hurt my shoulder. And I sure as hell never brought it up. I chuckled awkwardly, trying to play it cool. Yeah, that's a secret weapon of mine. Catches folks off guard in arm wrestling matches." Jamie smirked like he was savoring some inside joke he'd been dying to share. But inside, I was swirling with suspicion. How on earth did he find that out? Did I just forget spilling this in some late-night ramble? Or did he snoop around more than I thought? "Okay, spill it," I said, voice half joking but mostly serious. "How do you know that? You've been kind of unusually well-informed about my life lately." Jamie shrugged, still grinning. "Oh, I've got my ways." That vague answer didn't help but added to the mystery. I felt this mixture of shock, a pinch of violation, and an odd tinge of amusement. It was like living with this roommate who somehow knew too much, too fast. I sipped my coffee, glancing at him sideways, weighing my next move. How could my own roommate know so much about me without me telling him? Was this a harmless coincidence? Or, more likely, was Jamie not just a casual roommate but some detective undercover? And honestly, that little moment, that tiny slip when he revealed my shoulder secret, was the start of a story I never expected to live through in this shared apartment of ours. Moving in with Jamie wasn't exactly my idea. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. I was the one who answered the ad on Craigslist in a rush, chasing a half-decent rent price. Somewhere between my bank account's panic attack and my "I swear this apartment will be fine" mantra, Jamie's name popped up as the sole other tenant. I figured, hey, better him than some weirdo with a penchant for midnight drum solos. So yeah, Jamie became my new reality. At first glance, Jamie seemed like your standard friendly roommate package, the kind of guy who always had a joke ready, kept the kitchen cleaner than I did, which honestly wasn't a high bar, and who loudly proclaimed his love for cereal at all hours of the day. He had this easy charm too. Like he genuinely cared about how your day was going, but yeah, almost a bit too eager, like one of those Ask Me Anything Reddit threads come to life. I remember our first night together pretty well. We sat in the tiny, sitcom-worthy living room of our two-bedroom apartment, which smelled faintly of old carpet and that weird amalgamation of every tenant who ever moved out before us. Jamie was blitzing me with questions. And I mean blitzing. What's your favorite movie? Your deadliest kitchen disaster? Your secret phobia? I answered cautiously, picking and choosing my words like I was negotiating a hostage release. The questions were mostly lighthearted, but there was this undercurrent of him trying to map me out, and I was standing there wondering, is this normal roommate stuff, or is Jamie secretly writing a biography about me? See, it's not just that Jamie asked a bit too much, that would be vaguely annoying but manageable. The real deal breaker for me was the secret I was holding on to. Something so particular and so personal that sharing it even in fragments felt like handing over the keys to a locked vault. It wasn't that I necessarily distrusted Jamie. Well, no, that's a lie. I was wary of him, sure, more like guarded, because this secret shadowed every day of my life. It was the reason I avoided certain topics, ducked out of late-night gatherings, and sometimes even declined to invite my best friend Alex over without a solid excuse. And damn, keeping that secret tight was hard enough without Jamie playing private investigator. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of secret you can just gloss over like forgetting your umbrella on a rainy day. This was one of those deep-rooted things. The kind you don't even say aloud to your reflection because it might just ripple and spill over. So there I was, living with a roommate who was not just friendly but a bit too thorough in customizing his knowledge of me. You know what I mean? Like someone who treats you less like a co-inhabitant and more like a subject under a microscope. But Jamie's friendly nosiness didn't stop at small talk. Within the first week, I started catching glimpses of his odd habits. He had this little notebook that he kept tucked behind some DVDs on the shelf, always there but always accidentally slipped away whenever I entered the living room. And the way he lingered a bit too long outside my bedroom door when I went out or came back. I brushed these off, telling myself I was just being paranoid because of my secret. Then there were the gadgets, the real curveball. Jamie had this habit of collecting odd little things that reminded me of spy movies. Tiny cameras disguised as smoke detectors, one of those voice-activated recorders on the kitchen counter which he claimed was to catch the ghost in the building, whatever that meant, and sometimes a Bluetooth bug attached to the hallway light switch. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I'd ask casually about them, and Jamie would just laugh it off with some quirky explanation. Like the recorder thing. He said, "My aunt once caught a raccoon running through her attic with that. Saves you from creepy crawly surprises?" Right. Raccoons are terrifying and all, but I lived in a fifth-floor apartment, not exactly ARK territory. I guess my threshold for tolerance started getting thinner, especially the day I came home early from work. I found Jamie sitting cross-legged on the floor of my bedroom, fiddling with some papers spread over my bed. The first thing I think, how the hell did he get in? The second, what the actual heck is going on? I cleared my throat, trying my best not to sound like a raging tornado. Jamie jumped up as though caught mid-heist, but then just grinned, like he'd been expecting me all along. I asked him straight up, "What are you doing here?" He shrugged, hands in his pockets, and said with that mischievous smirk, "Relax, I was just organizing your mail. You have some important-looking stuff, and I figured you might have missed it." "Why do you even care about my mail? And why were you in my room without asking?" I felt my patience curling up like a cat ready to scratch. Jamie laughed, a bit too easily, and replied, "Come on, man, we're roommates. This is our space. Plus, I thought this was a good place to stash the extra chargers and cables that kept cluttering the living room." His reasoning was so casual, it almost made me chuckle, but only almost. Somewhere between his casual invasion and his insistence that we share everything, I started wondering how much privacy I was about to lose living with someone like this. Part of me wanted to throw my hands up and just spill the secret to see how Jamie would handle it, put an end to the guessing games once and for all. But the other part, the cautious one, kept me silent. Because if Jamie knew too much already, what would happen when he found out the truth? Would it change everything between us? Or worse, leak into parts of my life that I fought hard to separate from this tiny apartment? So yeah, that was the state of things, me riding this awkward tightrope of trust and suspicion with a roommate who knew too much and didn't seem to get the memo about boundaries. But somehow, beneath the irritation and the odd invasions, I had a feeling this was only the beginning of a story far weirder than I ever imagined. So there I was, pacing the living room after that little mail incident, trying to figure out just how far Jamie's curiosity stretched. I mean, organizing my mail? That was just the tip of the iceberg, right? If he was already rifling through letters, what else was he poking around with? I started noticing it in those weird little moments. The soft rustle when I went to grab a snack, only to catch Jamie pretending to be immersed in a book but his eyes darting towards my direction. Or the casual, "Oh, I didn't know you liked that band," kind of lines, which made me wonder if he'd been sneaking a peek at my playlists or browsing through my laptop while I was out. One evening, I caught him near the kitchen counter fiddling with that voice-activated recorder again. The thing wasn't exactly subtle, bright red light blinking like it had a neon sign saying, "I'm recording you right now." I squinted at it suspiciously and asked, "Hey, that thing's still on? What's the ghost situation now?" Jamie just grinned, totally unfazed, and said, "Oh, you never know. Last week, I swear I caught some weird noises. Probably just the pipes, but keeps things interesting." Yeah, sure, because ghosts are real and they love our apartment complex. I wasn't buying it, but I also didn't want to sound like the paranoid roommate or the guy who can't handle a little eccentricity. Plus, Jamie's overall vibe was pretty easygoing, like the kind of guy you'd expect to bring you a coffee when you're feeling down, which made it all the more confusing why he was so intent on this low-key surveillance gig. Then came the discovery of his spy gear, as I started calling it in my head. One day, I was in the bathroom getting ready when I noticed a tiny lens peeking out from the smoke detector on the ceiling. The shape didn't match any standard product. I mean, who sticks a camera in a smoke detector? What kind of person does that and why in our apartment? I confronted Jamie that evening, trying to keep it casual over a beer, but failing miserably. "So, about that smoke detector," I pointed upward, trying not to sound like a conspiracy theorist. "That? Oh yeah, old model. Keeps an eye out for fires. We had a little scare last year, remember?" He gave me this grin that made it impossible to tell if he was joking or serious. "I don't remember a fire scare," I replied, raising an eyebrow. Jamie shrugged. "Well, maybe it's just my way of feeling safe. Can't be too careful these days." That answer, while oddly plausible, didn't quite settle my nerves. It felt like something bigger was brewing beneath all these odd jobs of feeling safe and catching raccoons. The real breaking point came a few nights later. I was half asleep when I heard a faint clicking sound from my bedroom door. That soft, deliberate tap-tap that isn't random. I swung my head up to see Jamie standing there with that same somehow knowing smirk. I forgot my headphones in here," he said casually, stepping inside before I could say no. The nerve. I scrambled out of bed, heart thudding, but before I could get all accusatory, Jamie held up his hands like he was defusing a bomb. Hey, chill, I'm not here to spy or freak you out, he said, voice low, almost sheepish. Look, I get it. You want your space. I respect that. But you gotta know, I'm not the nosy creep you think I am. I blinked, waiting for the punchline. Jamie took a breath and said, Honestly, I'm just trying to understand you, to help you. There's stuff going on, stuff you don't talk about, and I figured if I'm gonna share this space, I should kinda know what's up. That caught me off guard in a way nothing else had. For a moment, the tension in the room thickened, like we were standing on this invisible line between suspicion and a weird kind of trust. So, you're saying all this? I gestured around the apartment vaguely. Spy gear? Snooping through my stuff? It's some misguided help thing? Jamie nodded, a faint crunching noise as he shifted on his feet. Yeah, I guess I'm not the best at subtlety. It was a weird confession, part disarming, part disturbing. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or throw a pillow at him, but hearing it put a sudden spotlight on everything, the weird gadgets, his constant hovering, his too knowing glances, maybe it wasn't malice after all, just an awkward attempt at being involved, or maybe even a signal that he cared in his bizarre way. Still, even with that small truce in place, I felt on edge. What did this mean for my secret? If Jamie was already this invested in breaking down walls, how long until my carefully guarded truth became just another item on his investigation list? The days that followed were a strange dance. On one hand, Jamie dialed back on the open invasions. No more sitting on my bed organizing mail without asking. On the other, the occasional glance, the half-hidden notebook, the softly blinking devices reminded me that the line between living together and living under a microscope was thinner than ever. And the worst part? Part of me was weirdly relieved that my secret wasn't so much under attack, but maybe just acknowledged in some roundabout way. But the other part was still screaming, watch your back. So yeah, sharing an apartment with Jamie wasn't turning out to be as standard as I'd hoped. Between dodging his overeager curiosity and holding my fortress of privacy together, I couldn't help but wonder, was I ready for the moment Jamie crossed from overly inquisitive roommate to person who knows everything? Because if that moment came, there was no turning back. A few days after that uneasy conversation, Jamie and I found ourselves sitting on the peeling couch, an awkward piece hanging between us like a thick fog. He had backed off, the tiny, blinking gadgets vanished, replaced by a slightly more respectful distance. But there was still that tension in his eyes, that glint of, I know something, and in me, a constant question mark hovering above my head. Then, one evening, Jamie just said it. Not in a grand, dramatic way, but between two barely stirred cups of instant coffee. Look, I'm not exactly proud of how I went about all of this, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck, the classic awkward move right there. I should have asked more, snooped less. But he hesitated, like peeling off a Band-Aid. I kinda stumbled onto your secret. My heart did that weird skip-flip thing you only get in movies, which, believe me, didn't help with my cool guy facade. Okay, so what? What did you hear? Jamie took a breath, voice low. That thing you never talk about. The reason you keep to yourself and avoid Alex's nights out. I know it's big, I know it's personal, and I'm not gonna lie, it scared me at first. There it was, the admission. He really knew, not from some casual eavesdropping, but because, well, I guess I'd left enough cracks for him to pry through. I didn't go blabbing about it, Jamie hurried to add, probably reading my instant distrust like a book. I'm not that kind of idiot. I wanted to believe him, and part of me desperately needed to. Because as much as the secret felt like a weight on my chest, sharing it, even silently, made the apartment feel a little less like a trap. So, what now? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant but feeling like I was unraveling at the seams inside. Jamie shrugged, eyes finally meeting mine without that teasing smirk. We live here. We're stuck with each other. I'm not going to pretend to understand it all, but I want you to know I'm not going to use what I know against you. That was, a relief. The tension between us started to dissolve. The apartment felt a little lighter. For once, Jamie acted like a teammate, not a secret police officer. But here's the kicker. I didn't suddenly spill the secret, nor did I invite Alex over more often. That shadow of mine still lurked, and honestly, I wasn't ready to let it go. Instead, I found myself twisting and turning this odd new roommate dynamic. Was Jamie's sharp curiosity just persistent help, or was it something else? Was this a fresh start, or the beginning of a long, weird saga where nothing would ever stay private? Some days, Jamie's quirks became less annoying and more endearing. Like when he showed up with 2 cartons of cereal because you can never have too many options, or when he actually listened when I rambled about something dumb. But other times, even now, I catch that little unease creeping back, the reminder that my personal life was no longer a locked safe, but more like a glass jar on the kitchen counter. And honestly, I don't know yet if this is a blessing or a curse. Maybe living with Jamie is like having a walking, talking contradiction, someone who's part guardian, part annoying detective, all wrapped up in this weird version of roommate. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Somehow, we've settled into this peculiar peace with secrets barely hidden and privacy redefined. But tell me this, if your roommate knew way too much, really too much, what would you do? Because with Jamie, I'm thinking this story isn't over yet and my secret might just be waiting for the next chapter to unfold.